Good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 48. As I always do with these things, I'm going to start us off with a bit of a tune. That one. And that was the Warwickshire Lad, which was the regimental march of the Warwickshire Regiment at the time of the Anglo-Zulu War in 1879. And of course, the 1st and 2nd Battalion 24 Foot were both in Zululand in 1879, which was most unusual for both battalions to be in the same place. And they were actually the Royal Warwickshire Regiment in 1879, and they only became the South Wales Borderers in 1881. There you go. And that was from the excellent channel Patriotic Archive, which I always say everybody should go and watch. Now, just before I introduce our guests, I just wanted to say to regular viewers, you regular viewers will have noticed I was supposed to have a stream a couple of days ago, an old Commonwealth stream, and it didn't happen. And my deepest apologies to people about that. It was my fault in a way, in that I had a power cut for about 12 hours. We had a huge windstorm here about a week or so ago, and some person removing the damaged tree managed to cut down 2 power lines. So I had no power for the vast majority of the day. And that stream has been rescheduled, and it will either be next Thursday or Friday, because depending on what the chaps I was doing it with prefer to do. And as soon as I know, you'll be able to check that. But again, my apologies about that old Commonwealth stream. Okay, let me introduce my guests, and I'm going to go in clockwise order. So good evening, John. How are you going?
Evening. I'm going all right. I'm enjoying the weekend.
Good to hear. And also, Rupert August, how are you going, sir?
Good evening. Not too bad. Surviving, certainly, in this dystopia we find ourselves in.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. John, you know the way I do these streams. Did you have a first topic that you would like to bring up?
Yeah, I don't normally like to talk too much about American goings on. It's not a country I've got too much of an interest in, but or certainly try not to. But I've been watching the a certain trial this week. I don't know how YouTube acts when you name people, but yeah, I've been watching a trial that's been going on. I've watched it, while I've been working from home. It's quite easy to have something on in the background, and I might be being quite pessimistic, but I think that poor lad is going to end up doing a number of years in prison.
Well, it's a political show trial as far as I'm concerned. I don't think the guy's going to get a fair trial. I think anyone who thinks he's going to get a fair trial is being naive. They're being naive if they think he is, because the media and the left are pushing so hard.
I think from what I've seen of the judge, I think the judge has been reasonably fair. He's certainly come down on the prosecution a number of times, especially around constitutional matters like the kind of right to remain silent kind of thing. But the problem is we all get to see that, but the jury don't, and not unless they're willing to break their kind of ethical, they're not meant to view anything pertaining to the case while they're on the jury. So assuming they play by that, they won't see any of that. They won't see just how basically low and dirty the prosecution have tried to be. They'll know that they got sent out the room and that something was said, but they won't know what, and they won't know the lengths to which the judge really did rip into them on a number of occasions.
The three people he shot, which he did in self-defense, and you can watch the video, and it clearly was in self-defense. He fired reluctantly and only at people who were directly threatening his life. One of them was a pedophile. The other one was a wife beater, and the third one was some description of Antifa thief. So I reckon they should give him a medal, not take him to court. But there we go.
Well, somebody did raise the point, I think it was on Twitter, that the standards by which the police are supposed to be held to are completely absurd. That BLM are demanding in terms of, okay, you only use your firearm when you're immediately under threat, and you only fire to disarm, not to kill.
Can't do that.
Rittenhouse actually did that, and they're still smearing him.
You actually can't fire to disarm somebody. This stuff that they show you in Hollywood about, I'll shoot you in the leg or the arm.
Well, you just shoot the gun out of their hand or whatever. Yeah, it's just nonsense. You aim for the center of mass because that's the quickest way to stop someone.
Absolutely. That's what you do.
And it's the biggest target.
You keep firing until they're no longer a threat to you.
Yes.
But again,
exactly what he did.
I was going to say that's the point, though, is that Rittenhouse met exactly this standard of shooting only to disarm in a non-threatening way against the one fellow who was trying to raise a gun to him.
He was also a volunteer firefighter. He voluntarily helped out the cops as well. And I believe his original reason for being there was to try and stop a church burning down.
Something like that. I think he was there for as I understand it, to help protect a friend's shop. That was my understanding. Property of some kind.
But then he moved to try and stop some church burning down, is what I understood was happening.
I wouldn't be surprised.
The crux of it is, like, there's plenty of video showing him, offering assistance to people, trying to put out fires, just being a presence and potentially deterring a number of acts that might have otherwise happened. And
if he'd wanted to go there just to shoot people, he would have shot a lot more people than the ones he did.
Well, this is the thing,
and they wouldn't all have been white Antifa guys.
He went there with a single magazine, or I think they kept referring to it as a clip, of 30 rounds, and of those 30, he shot, I think, 9, maybe 10.
Which with a semi-automatic is not much.
No, this is the thing. Like, if he'd gone there intending to kill people, he could have done a lot more than 2.5. And you would think he would have gone there with a lot more ammunition as well, not just a single.
Yes, absolutely right. And I mean, let's remember the guys attacking him. Most of them were armed.
Well, I think. Apart from Rosenbaum, which is the first one, I think they were all armed to some degree or another, either with a gun or another impromptu weapon.
And he was hugely outnumbered. and he was in fear of his life. So I think entirely justified self-defense. That's
one of the most ridiculous arguments I saw from the prosecution was in relation to Rosenbaum and how he was running through this car lot, and there's a lot of other people around, and basically his route of escape is cut off, and Rosenbaum kind of catches him, puts his hand on his gun, and that's when Kyle, pops him. And the prosecution tried to argue that, after he shot him, you can see there's loads of places that he could have run to, and it's like, well, yeah, because after he shot him, everyone's scarpered. You idiots! Like, it doesn't matter what there is after he shot him; it's what there is there before.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, looking at the film of it, it's self-defense. I think this is this is a political show trial as much as anything else.
The problem is, in the last day, they brought forward a picture which they claim, and it's a really ropey claim, in my view. They claim you can see Kyle pointing his gun at Rosenbaum before Rosenbaum begins to attack him. Or no, sorry. I want to put this clear. He is supposedly pointing his gun at the Kaminskis or something like that. Two people who are in the process of setting fire to something, and the prosecution are trying to say that is the reason that Rosenbaum attacked Kyle, because Kyle was threatening other people, and therefore it's provocation. And at the point provocation is involved, you can no longer plead self-defense, which is what Kyle's entire defense relies on.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't.
So they spent a good couple of hours deliberating over basically one very zoomed in, cropped SD standard definition drone picture that you can't make anything out on.
Yeah. No, I agree.
But they will get him on that. I think. I think if the jury are not sympathetic, if the jury are not, it really goes down to what kind of characters they have on the jury. I think, as it does in all cases, obviously. But
that's the problem. So he's already had a trial by media in most cases, yes, and that continues to be ongoing. And so, if that has affected the jury in any way, it won't really matter.
This is the real problem in our modern day, with sort of like 24/7 news and a news media that are very quick to make a decision to label people guilty until proven innocent, whereas we know, in our legal system, you are innocent until proven guilty, or at least you should be. They kind of tarnish every single court case. You can't have a court case anymore, I don't believe, where people's minds haven't already been at least partially convinced by the media before you get there. They really need to be held to a higher standard of reporting, because really they destroy or spoil every single trial before you even get to it.
Well, who's going to hold them to that standard, though, is the problem.
Yeah. And in the current political climate in America, where the government, I think, would quite like poor young Rittenhouse.
Well, because of course, if he doesn't, you end up with more riots, and they don't want that.
But on the other hand, if they do send that young man to jail for anything other than a very short period, I just think it's going to push America yet further towards an actual split.
There will be nothing that comes as of this, because people are too comfortable.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I don't think it's going to lead America to a civil war, but America is going to push the better part, the better people in America, yet further away from the government.
I firmly believe there will come a day where the government of America comes for every American's guns, and almost every American will hand them over without a fight.
I agree with the first part. I don't agree with the second part.
I think you will get a few Wacos. I don't think that will be the norm. I think most Americans will hand them in. How was it in Australia, when they did the mandatory buyback there?
There was quite a lot of people who didn't like. I mean, it's before my time, before I was here. But talking to people I know, there was quite a lot of pushback against it. And don't forget, Australia was by no means in the same position as the UK. If I wanted to get a 303 rifle, a bolt action rifle, I could do so fairly easily.
Mm.
But they haven't banned. The only thing they banned in Australia was semi-automatics. So
I mean,
if you want to buy a 303 Enfield which can carry 11 rounds, you can do so quite happily.
But I mean, a semi-automatic is virtually every rifle made after sort of the mid 1940s, right?
No, 1960.
Oh,
all right. Sorry, 1955. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Well, you did have a number of semi-automatics during World War II.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, you did. But I mean, the British Army.
You're right. They continued with the short magazine Lee Enfield for a while, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah, the British Army only shifted in 56, I think.
Sure.
50,
okay.
Yeah. So you can say from the mid 50s.
There is also just the civilian industry that continues to produce semi-automatics. Brand new.
Yeah.
Not semi-automatic. Other than semi-automatics, I mean, like bolt action.
Bolt action.
Oh yeah, you can still buy those, but I mean, like when I lived in South Africa, I had a semi-automatic.
You want one in South Africa? I think
I had
one today.
I had a rifle and I had a pistol, and the pistol actually went most places with me. So yeah, but.
Yeah, I know a number of people who've come over from South Africa, and they haven't half got a good story to tell.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or not a good story, if you know what I mean.
Duerty fan is saying here, and I presume he's talking about Australia, you need a gun club membership or own a couple of hectares of land, which is, and a gun club membership is pretty easy to get. There's still quite a lot of gun stores. My local town has a gun shop.
This is the thing. You can still get them in the UK, but it's not like it is in America, where it's the rule rather than the exception. Everyone can have one if they want one. It seems like until relatively recently there were very few bars to entry.
I mean, in Australia they used one shooting as an excuse. There was
it was the same in the UK.
Yeah, it was one nutcase in Tasmania, and they said, okay, well, you can't have rifles. And as Lady Charlotte is saying in the chat here, a lot of Aussies did not like it, and large numbers hugely regret it today, which is true.
Well, it was the same in the UK. I mean, if you look on the Wellington Project, one of our founders, Joz, he did a good article sort of going into the history of not just guns, but sort of ownership of arms in the UK. And
which was very common
up until the return of soldiers from World War I. I think I'm quoting this right. You still had British prime ministers at that point saying it would be, they longed for the day where every home in the land had a gun.
Yeah.
It's very recent that British political attitude soured towards guns, and that's probably
the British elite's attitude. You mean?
Well, political attitude, and I was going to say, that only comes as probably I should imagine the British people's attitude of the political elite has worsened.
Well, I remember there was the pistol ban in the UK was mainly that moron nutcase in Scotland, a place called Dunblane, I believe, who opened fire on a kids' school.
I think that was one of the two. There were two events that kind of catapulted us into where we are today.
I think Max Ernst is correct, saying a shotgun is still fairly easy to get in the UK, particularly if you're a farmer or you've got a bit of land somewhere.
Yeah, shotgun and shotgun's probably the easier one.
Well, I've got to say, if I was in Britain today, I would probably try and get a shotgun license, just purely for self-defense. And not even. No, I know what you're going to say there, John. Self-defense is no longer recognised in the UK.
Yeah, you are not allowed. Yeah, that is not a reason for you to own a gun in the UK.
No, when I say self-defense, I'm talking about if and when there is a breakdown in law.
Yes, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Which I think eventually is very liable to happen.
For any of your viewers, start going to a gun range, and that can be your reason to apply for a license to own one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't quote anything else.
Yeah, or as we were talking about earlier before the stream side, I mean, another thing to do, which will at least teach you to shoot, is to possibly think about joining the reserve army or something like that.
Yes, that's yeah, we talked about that. That's something I think I would like to do in the not too distant future.
Well, I mean, apart from anything else, it will get you fit. It will teach you some fieldcraft. It will teach you how to read a map. All useful skills if the shit ever really hits the fan.
I mean, again, for listeners, if they're interested, I think as a private you can join up until you're 42.
Yeah, it's vastly extended now because they find it so difficult to get people.
It's a lot. I think for an officer, I don't know. It may be 47 or something. I think it's like 5 years extra.
I definitely think it's something would be worth thinking about doing because you will learn useful skills, and you'll get a bit fitter, and you'll probably also make some decent mates as well.
My problem at the moment is I need to get a bit fitter before they'll even consider me.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a good reason to do that.
Absolutely.
And I mean, as we were saying before the stream, you do get paid for it. I mean, you don't get paid a fortune for it, but it is extra money. They don't expect you to do it for nothing. And yeah, I mean, I was in the regular forces, and when I left, if I had have stayed in the UK, I might have gone into the reserve forces. But as it happened, I moved away from the UK. So. But
yeah, I talked with you. I said I come at least on my mum's side from quite a military family, and I always kind of felt like the odd one out, like the break in the chain for not.
Well, if you do it, John, don't forget to mention that to them because I'm unless they have totally changed since my day, family ties are something they value. So always worth mentioning.
Anyway,
but yeah, I think all of us would agree that we wish the best to young Mr. Rittenhouse, and we hope he gets a just verdict and walks away. I do so.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I do genuinely believe he, the prosecution have done a very good job of painting him as a bit of a wayward individual.
Which is difficult to argue when you're a volunteer firefighter and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, he's got the problem whereby he didn't have a license and would drive everywhere. I think technically it may not have been legal for him to own the gun at that time. I think they've tried to paint him as a bit of a weed abuser.
Which
and also they've tried to paint him as a bit of a liar as well, because on the night when he was interviewed, he claimed he was an EMT, but of course he isn't an EMT, and he was he was doing various he's done various first aid courses and stuff, which as a 17-year-old is quite admirable, but EMT he was not. And of course that all goes into the whole you're a lawbreaker, you're a liar.
I don't know. Like I said, going on the evidence of the film of what he did,
I hope he gets off, and I believe he should get off. Yeah,
he should walk away. The number of people who were involved in looting, riots, and murder in America over that summer who have not been prosecuted at all. They haven't been prosecuted even. I just think, if Rittenhouse gets convicted, then it's just another nail in America's coffin as a serious nation rather than a hugely rich banana republic.
I mean, look at the way that it's been covered by, either side really, and just the way that both sides have been treating sort of their opposite partisans, and you can kind of see that regardless of the outcome, it's going to be increasing the temperature.
Yeah. Anyway, I wish him all the best, but I really, if he is convicted, I shall be extremely sad about it. As you rightly say, John, this is not an American show, but to me, I think he was not doing anything bad. And as I said, one of the people he shot was a pedophile, for God's sake. Now, I don't know about
five times this man penetrated small boys. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about you guys, but personally, I have nothing against pedophiles being killed. I have to say, in Minecraft for Susan at YouTube, because I know Susan likes because Susan at YouTube probably likes pedophiles. But there we go.
Well, she's probably best mates with a few of them, I should imagine.
Yeah, quite likely. All right, let's move it along. Rupert, have you got something you would like to bring up as first subject?
It's probably a couple of little things. Probably the most dispiriting and affecting thing that I saw was a segment on GB News actually by Mark Stein, I think is his name, talking about Rotherham and basically how the rape gangs have never really gone away, despite that being a scandal back in the day. It's just sort of carried on, and if anything, it's possibly bigger than ever.
Yeah, I think that's almost certainly true. Did you have anything else to add to that one, Rupert, on that particular first point?
Well, I just wonder kind of what's the way out of it, because it sort of seems to me that there was that one policeman who was actively involved.
The policeman that was kind of held up as an example of the wonders of diversity in policing.
Yes, actively encouraging more Pakistanis, I think it was, to get enrolled and join the police force.
That will go well.
Yeah.
All I can say is I hope that the inmates in jail deal out the punishment that the British legal system can no longer.
I feel like a lot of them kind of at this point functionally control large segments of the police, the prison system, like on the inside. Considering the being perceived as anti-Islamic and going into prison is very dangerous to one's life in itself. And sometimes
if you go to a serious prison, that's true as far as I understand it. Yes.
Yeah. Criminals they may be, but they certainly know how to deal out justice to paedophiles.
Yeah, but that's always been the case in British prisons. I mean, to be fair, like British, you were always going to be in solitary in a British prison if you were a pedophile.
I can only hope that remains true, because
it may or may not. I suspect it wouldn't if you were an Islamic pedophile.
Right. This is the problem. Like the sheer amount of complacency and seeming cooperation within the community kind of. That's where my mindset starts to go to slightly darker places.
Yeah, no, I agree. Just to answer Joe in the chat. Joe in the chat is saying, speaking of which, Warhol filmed teenage boys for pornos. Just saying. Well, I don't know, Joe. You might be confusing me with a different channel, because I've never pushed Warhol. I've never pushed Warhol. Never pushed Andy Warhol. I didn't like his art. I don't like most modern art. So I don't know.
I am staying silent on this.
Yes, I'm sure you are, John. But I mean, honestly, I've never pushed Warhol. I mean, I don't have Grinder Greg on my show either. So this is. I try not to be a hypocrite. I'm many things, but I try not to be a hypocrite. But yeah, Max Ernst is saying in the chat also about your point here, Rupert, that some blokes tried to intervene but were threatened or arrested, or were arrested, and I believe there was there was a father who was arrested. I think
that's the classic example that gets brought up every time. Dad goes and makes a fuss about it. And...
A poor dad tried to get his daughter back from these monsters, and the police arrested him.
Yeah, which it does seem on examples like that, it seems like the police are actively sort of cooperating on it.
Well, it makes a lot of sense as well, doesn't it, when you've got members of the police who are part of these grooming rings?
That's why I bring that up. Yeah. So
and I mean, we have a two-tier, and this in a way goes back to what John was talking about in the USA, because the same thing is true over there. We already have almost a two-tier policing and court system, whereby if you are a white guy, you are going to get a much harder deal than if you're not. And then this is just a fact. It's just a fact.
I think this has become easier for them. I'm not the biggest fan of Pete Hitchens, because I think he's very he's very strong on reasons for why things are wrong, and he's very short on what we do to change it. But he wrote, I'm trying to think. Is it The Abolition of Britain, or there's another one he wrote, and it may be that one that I'm thinking of. It may be The Abolition of Britain, where he talks about the prison system, and
he does talk about it in that
he
book.
talks about the police force, or the police service as it now is, and he opines for the day when you actually had policemen out on the streets, and you had regular patrols, and the police would deal with kind of the low level miscreancy that develops into criminal activity in later life. And they knew the community, but as police have been detached and taken out from the community, they become rather than a benefit to the community, they become a tool of the state and a way to oppress a community rather than to actively be part of and benefit it. And because these police officers don't know who they're dealing with from Adam, they have far less of a problem being heavy-handed with people.
I have to agree.
They just have they have no respect for the general public.
Well, they don't know them.
Well, yeah, exactly.
I know. I have to totally agree with Peter Hitchens when he talks about the worst thing that happened in Britain was when they got rid of police officers on the beat who actually walked around the patch every day, because they put people off doing crimes. They also got to know the local people, and started to trust them and all this kind of crap.
The young lads that are a bit lively and they do stupid things. They get a clip round the ear, and it deters them from going further down the path, kind of thing.
Absolutely. And I mean,
they know there's a watchful eye over them.
I'm old enough to just remember when cops were still beat cops. Because I'm 56. I can just about remember cops still walking around with their helmets and stuff in inner London suburbs and stuff. And you're quite right. Like, if you did something minor that was wrong, you'd get a clip around the ear. You wouldn't get taken to court, and that was more effective. But also, they did get to know the local population. I mean, a lot of cops back then were like ex-military guys and stuff like that. They weren't the graduates that they tend to take these days. A lot of them were like ex-sergeants from the army and stuff like that.
Don't get me started. I'm so sick of everything needing a degree in this country. You practically need a degree to wipe your arsehole nowadays.
I mean, just imagine if they made it so all private. Yeah, just imagine if they made all private soldiers have to have degrees. We'd even have a smaller military than we have now. Difficult that is to believe, but you don't need a degree to keep law and order.
No, well, you do when they bring in 50 million laws that no one knows.
But half the time the police don't even know the law very well themselves. Look what's happened with lockdown protests.
How can they possibly be expected to know the law when people like Tony Blair's government were introducing dozens that are ill thought out, ill conceived. It's ridiculous, and the Tories have just carried on. They introduce all these ridiculous laws like upskirting bills and things like that. And not that I'm a fan of people upskirting, but I'm fairly certain that could be dealt with within the existing law without making it a specific bill to appeal to the kind of feminazis. And
it's the same thing with the feminists and the left want to make wolf whistles a crime. I mean, give me a break. If as far as I understand it at the moment, if you get broken into, your house gets broken into in the UK now, you get a number off the cops. The cops won't turn up until about a day later.
It depends. Someone did break into an outhouse of mine, and the police were there very, very quickly.
Did they catch them?
Not on this occasion. They did when my neighbours across the road were broken into. So they will come out. They tend not to come out for shoplifting. I worked in retail, and we got very used to, the security guard would catch a thief, and then the police would be like, "Yeah, we're going to be we're not going to be there today, and so all you can do is let the thief go. This,
I think we're heading for the situation in many states in America whereby if you don't steal $1,000, they can't do anything. They can't do anything at all.
There's videos coming out of people, they literally just walk in, grab a load of stuff and walk out, and the staff just stood there.
Staff and security are not allowed to touch them.
It's insanity.
You have to wonder how that. Well, I mean, it's already been pointed out. This isn't my own point exactly, but how that affects the supply crisis and logistics crisis.
Yeah. We've wandered a bit, Rupert. Was there anything else you wanted to add to this little bit that we're talking about at the moment? Although not that it's a little bit, because you're talking about tens of thousands of British schoolgirls who are being abused.
Yeah. Well, I'm just wondering about to mull for a moment on what a possible way out would look like. How do you even begin to rectify something like this?
Enforce the law. Enforce the law might be a start.
We have no power to do that when the local government is corrupt, the police are corrupt.
It's a bit of a
government don't care.
It's a bit of a black pill, but it's easy to imagine that the horse has already bolted on this one.
Well, I mean, to my mind, the only thing that one can do is, that kind of thing shakes my my natural tendency towards faith in the police quite significantly. So, I start wondering about how you would be able to do some of the old jobs of policing without the police if you can't trust them anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, people are talking about doing stuff local and all the rest of it.
This is the point. Yeah, this is what I would say.
I think, you need to get quite involved in any local neighbourhood watch and things like that, I think, if you can.
And I mean, if that can be effective, I think, but you've just got to be so careful that you don't go too far, because they'll end up arresting you. It's just so crazy.
I mean, I know we're dealing with a two-tier system, so the comparison doesn't exactly work. But considering we've got active, slave workshops ongoing in Leicester, just because they've got basically the entire apparatus of government to screen them.
Yes. Yeah.
There are options there for trying to make sure that nobody's going to come prying when everybody's happy with the situation, and nobody's sort of actively reaching out for the outside government if you don't.
Yeah.
If you don't want them to.
I don't know. I mean, I find it difficult to talk about this stuff because these are schoolgirls. I don't understand when a country won't protect its own bloody little girls. I don't know, man. Don't know.
Well, again, you're in a. It's not just the state, is it? You're in a country, and Ataman brought this up on your stream last week, and I'll quote the figure. You're in a country now where 1/5 of all, so I think live births are 600 and I want to get the number right. It's around 630,000 or something in that region, and abortions are now. I think the figure is 210,000. So you are talking something like 1 in 4 potential live births are terminated.
Well, I mean, I made a comment, I think it was actually on your Discord, John, last week, that I wonder if the UK government was to turn around and said, I think we're going to start terminating after birth people who are mentally and physically handicapped in order to protect the NHS and save the planet. I reckon a load of British people would go along with that now, quite frankly.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
They already do that for the elderly. The Bristol, was it the Bristol Care Path or something like that? I can't remember the proper name of it, but it was basically, if they're elderly and they've not got a lot of hope left, you kind of just don't give them no food, no water, and they'll go a bit quicker.
Yeah, it's very like what a certain Austrian painter guy did in mid-20th century Germany.
The problem with a nationalised health service, to the extent that we have it, means that you do end up having to do stuff to protect and preserve that rather than the other way around. And you do start to have a vested interest in the health of the nation, which, as you say, was something that the Austrian was very concerned with, and
he was a fanatical anti-smoker. He was all about. He was a vegetarian.
Well, the vegetarian one's brought up a lot. There's some conjecture on that. It's possible, probable that was on the advice only of his doctor as he got older and he got ill with a number of things. But
I'm not sure about that, John.
He was definitely concerned with animal welfare, though. He's strengthened animal welfare laws, I believe.
Yeah. I'll be honest, and I've read a lot of history. I have never read that he wasn't a vegetarian at all from any source. And I've read a lot. Yeah. I've read a lot of history and a lot of World War II history, and not once have I read it anywhere that he wasn't a vegetarian. And I think the only people who try and claim he wasn't are current vegetarians.
Uh-oh.
I mean, I'm not. No. Listen, I'm not having a go at you at all, John. And there was a stage in my life where I spent 3 years where I was a vegetarian, and I didn't even eat fish, which a lot of so-called vegetarians do.
Pescatarian.
Yeah, but I didn't even do that. I was never a vegan. I still ate eggs and cheese and so on. But I spent 3 years as a vegetarian, so I'm not being a hypocrite here. But I honestly think the only people who try to claim that the Austrian painter was not a vegetarian are modern vegetarians, and especially vegans, of course, because those guys are just beyond the pale as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, you're kind of suggesting they don't want to be associated with him, I guess.
Yes, absolutely right. And the point I made, and I said this on your Discord. Is that this is where I was talking about if the government said they would terminate babies just after birth who were mentally or physically handicapped, because I reckon we're absolutely moving towards that total dystopian situation.
We already know that there are examples of abortions that happen where the child is born and they literally just leave it there to die. Yeah. It is quite horrific, and interestingly, it would be remiss of me to go a stream without bringing up Enoch Powell. Enoch Powell actually introduced a members' bill. I think it was a members' bill in the UK to prevent government and scientific bodies from testing on embryos, and of course, the government. Which may have been a Labour government of the day.
May well have been, yeah.
The government obviously, basically went against it, and of course it lost. It got quite a lot of public support, as a lot of things Enoch Powell did, because he was interested in representing the public. But yeah, I think it's a slippery slope, isn't it? Yeah. I firmly believe that we moved the Nazi concept of life unworthy of life to the womb, and by doing so, we desensitized people to it, because it's very difficult when faced with a human being to determine that their life is not worthy. And of course, the Nazis managed it, and I'm sure that you could manage it in the UK if you got to the same point. But
racial hierarchies never really went away. I mean,
no.
What's his name? George Orwell talks about it in Notes on Nationalism, I think, about the brewing phenomenon that we now see in sort of full bloom, existing all the way back then in the I think it was the early to mid 40s.
Well, I mean, look, let's be honest about this. You already have a situation where, like, if you were to talk about restricting abortion, not stopping it, but like saying, for example, you could only have an abortion up to 3 months, which I think would be if you're going to do something, that would be a reasonable way to reduce this, to start with at least.
Is that the existing? Is three?
No, it's longer. No, it's long. It's longer than that now. It's 6 months, I think. I think it's 6 months at the moment in the UK. And even it's later than that if you can come up with
you can. I mean, I think if it's Down syndrome or whatever, basically you can terminate it up to birth. But
But my point is this: if you were to say, look, we're only going to let you have an abortion, except for a good medical reason, up to 3 months. What you would get from all the feminists and the left is my body, my choice for women. But of course, that doesn't apply.
Doesn't seem to apply for COVID.
Forced vaccines, forced vaccines. There's no my body, my choice at all. Not even from the feminists or the left.
I mean,
and especially not from them. Actually,
that would be irrelevant if the media weren't also signal boosting them. I think that's the primary thing, because you can have groups screeching about any particular issue, and if they're not given a microphone, then it doesn't really matter too much.
Yeah, I keep saying this. It's like if the mainstream media don't actually report on stuff, which they very often do not do today, that doesn't suit the agenda. It's like one hand clapping in the forest. Did it happen for most normies who don't look anywhere else for their news?
This is exactly the problem. I mean, to pull it back to my original topic, just briefly.
Man. We have wandered. Please.
No, it's okay. It's just because it links back into that same phenomenon. Is that you really would not hear about the more, I'm not a big fan of grassroots movement. I don't think they're very effective. But the grassroots movement against pedophile gangs and things, you would hear nothing about that other than maybe there's been like one or two reportings on a local level that I've just not heard of about groups who are trying to hunt, basically pedophile hunters.
I grew up on a council estate, and I remember waking up one morning and I saw that the neighbour's house over the back of ours had nonce scrawled across the garage, and funnily enough, we never saw that neighbour again. So the grassroots of paedophile hunting is alive and well in the council estates of the UK. I'll tell you that much.
I tell you what, guys. I grew up in a very working class and poor area of Bermondsey in South London, like as a small child, up to actually an early teenager, and like I lived literally, I think probably 10 minutes walk from Tower Bridge on the south side of the river. And it was a very rough and ready place, don't get me wrong. But women and children could walk around that place totally safely for the most part. And like any sort of idea about someone who was a pedophile or some sort of nonsense, you say, they would not have lasted 2 minutes.
No, they'd be back in police protection looking for somewhere else to live.
Absolutely. They would have either gone to the cops to be protected, or they would have just effed off. They just wouldn't have survived in that area for 10 minutes. Like people of my father's generation who were born in 1933, those guys were just beyond the pale, totally beyond the pale. And I say guys, and they're not all guys. There are a few women like that, but they're mostly blokes, to be honest. And I am firmly convinced that like a lot of the LGBTQ stuff, and particularly
it's about paedophilia.
Yeah, particularly things like, so-called transvestite story hours and teaching little kids about being transgender and being gay and all this kind of stuff. They are after diddling your kids. That is the real thing they're after.
Yep.
And I know, for example, John is a father, so like as I am myself.
I'll be brutally honest. The Conservatives giving teachers a free rein over the sex education of 6-year-olds is part of one of the reasons I was so keen to have my son be homeschooled. Because
why do 6-year-olds need sex education?
Well,
they just don't. They just don't. They're innocent at that age.
Yep.
It's. I mean, all right. I suppose you could make an argument that they need a little bit of basic sex education when you're like, I don't know, 12 might be okay. But nobody under that needs anything, and even 12 is probably too young.
I don't know how it was when you went to school. When I went to school, you didn't. I mean, you got basic biology and science, right? But you didn't get the so-called sex education class till you got to about year 9, which I guess is about 14, give or take, which seems a relatively reasonable age to kind of start introducing those topics. If I had my way, to probably overshare, I was raised in a fairly fundamental Christian family. We did the whole, no sex before marriage thing. Both me and my wife did that, and you know what? Neither of us ever had an STI. Neither of us ever had an unwanted pregnancy. It worked quite well. Obviously, it doesn't work in all cases because a lot of people don't follow it. But there's something to it, and I think more kids should be taught that basically sex is more than just a mechanical affair.
Well, look, I certainly am no sort of very religious guy.
I don't say that to kind of shame anyone.
No. I think perfectly reasonable what you're saying, and your choice is a perfectly reasonable choice, and probably better than mine. But I was no sort of religious guy. In fact, for years I called myself an atheist. These days I'd probably say I was an agnostic. I'm never going to be a true believer, I'm afraid, but I've got absolutely nothing against people who are Christian, and I think that for society as a whole, a basic Christian morality is a good thing. But I will say this: I've never had an STD, and I'm 56 years old. Never had one of any description.
You're probably more discerning with your.
Yeah,
I have this
I was
overriding memory.
Very careful. Yes, I was always very careful
of a school that ended up with, I think, two classes per year. It was 3 by the time I left, it had gone down to 2 classes per year. We ended up with about a 5% pregnancy rate. So I guess in terms of girls, about a 10% pregnancy rate before they'd even sat their GCSEs.
Yeah,
and
absolutely,
this is because they're taught that sex is fine so long as it's safe, rather than.
But I think
there's a purpose to sex that extends beyond you just having a good time.
I mean, to be fair, I think that there is some merit to the idea that they're going to find out about it either way. But that's not necessarily, it's not necessarily an immutable phenomenon. It's just the fact that society at large has become so sort of steeped in it that it's just completely ingrained into the culture, and that's kind of one of the ways in which they are able to push to.
I'm not a prude. I've no real problem with them explaining to teenagers the mechanics of it and advising them that if you're going to engage in this, you'd be wise to be safe how you go about it. But certainly from my experience at school, it's almost taught with the expectation that you will, rather than presenting the kind of alternative that is to say, if it's not something you feel comfortable with, you don't actually need to do it.
I would just say this: I think you're entirely right, John. For your generation of when you were at school, and pretty much that was where it was at when I was at school too. Like they were teaching you about 14 about the basics, and yes, I'm sure that in some ways maybe led to a bit more promiscuity, but it was heterosexual promiscuity, largely. Now it's all about sodomy and they're not teaching it to 14-year-olds now. As you said yourself, they're teaching it to 6-year-olds, which is completely ridiculous. I mean, I remember my dad giving me a very embarrassed Birds and the Bees speech when I was like 15 or something. By which time I'd known about that stuff for years, But that's how it used to be. But now they're teaching this to toddlers.
Well, the thing is, there was the expectation that you didn't, with the knowledge that you probably would, and now there is the expectation that you will. And I think
it's not even heterosexual sex. This is why, for younger generations, you get these surveys that they're doing. The more and more people,
40% of them are LGBT.
Yeah. Well, that was in America. That was in America, but I think it was
worse than that.
And most of those were girls.
Worse than that, that was in America, and it was among religious people, Christians.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane.
That wasn't even in the general public, from what I understand. That was
wasn't it also true that in that same survey, wasn't it also true in that same survey? Many of these supposed Christians didn't really believe in Jesus.
Well, I don't think many Christians do believe in Jesus anymore, to be quite frank.
Well, then why are you Christian?
Well, your guess is as good as mine.
I don't understand how you can be a Christian and not believe in Jesus.
Well, they like the permissive elements of Christianity. They like the affirming elements of it. They like the judge not lest ye be judged. And of course they never read far enough to realize that you're supposed to judge in righteousness. Wow. They just take it on the face. All this stuff says I can be who I want to be, and that's what they value in it. They don't value Christianity at all. They value a few select passages, and they use that as their worldview.
Usually half of a complete passage.
Usually taken extremely out of context.
Yeah, let he who is without sin cast the first stone, followed up by now go forth and sin no more. They never talk about the latter part.
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm an agnostic, and that's probably the best I'm ever going to be if you're a Christian. But even I know that you can't really be a Christian and not believe in Jesus. It's kind of it's fundamental.
Well, they talk about they'll go down the whole pacifism thing. You shouldn't you should be, and it's like, please, there is literally a scripture where Christ tells his apostles, basically, if you lack money, go get a sword, and if you lack money, go sell your clothes and get a sword. Like, that's not the actions of a pacifist.
Yeah, but they all go on the turn the other cheek thing, don't they?
Well, yeah, again, that's out of context because turning the other cheek is almost an insult. It's not like turning the cheek as in flashing my bum or anything, but it's an insult if you're attacked by someone and you pay them no mind and you basically ignore them. You're saying they're not even worth dealing with.
Yeah,
you're so insignificant.
But to be fair, John, there are supposed Christian leaders who will
they're Satanists.
Yeah.
They don't know the first thing about Christ. Enoch Powell got a lot of this with the Church of England. There were a number of bishops and preachers who came down quite heavily on him. How can you be so callous towards immigrants and all this, that, and the other? And he's just like, there's a difference between the kingdom of God and political reality. And I'm a politician, not a preacher, basically.
All right. Look, I just want to make sure we don't go too off the subject because this is Rupert's thing that he's brought up here. Did you have stuff to add to that, Rupert?
No, nothing else in particular. I think I've sort of made all my points.
Was there another? I think you said you said you had a couple of things you wanted to bring up.
Yeah. There's at least one other quite funny point. It's definitely a lot more lighthearted.
Please go for it. Please go for it. We will come back to this in a minute, guys. By the way, because I do think it's quite important.
It's again, it's going back to America, unfortunately, but the left have actually suddenly become more concerned about unemployment and wage suppression from immigrants. Because there are black farm workers that are being tossed out of the cotton fields because South African white immigrants, are being brought in to take the jobs instead.
Oh, amazing!
If you're at all curious, I'll put the article in.
You get what you deserve.
Could that possibly be because they are harder working? Do you think?
Well, that's the implication because they're being paid more, and that's one of the criticisms. So.
Oh wow! So it's not even that they're being paid less.
Nope, they're being paid.
Amazing.
The South Africans are apparently being paid $11 an hour versus the African Americans getting $7.25 an hour.
No, but listen, let's remember, guys. Like I lived in South Africa for 15 years, if anyone doesn't know, and there are a lot of poor white South Africans, particularly Afrikaners. Like there used to be a time when if you were a poor white Afrikaner, you would work on South African railways or something like that. And of course, that's long gone. And so there are a lot of white Afrikaners who are living in absolute poverty. And if it wasn't for charity, which they only get from other white South Africans, particularly other Afrikaners, they would literally starve to death.
Yeah, the whole situation is very, very perverse due to the affirmative action in the extreme, where companies actively have to fire perfectly good, perfectly qualified, perfectly productive workers if they are overrepresented, basically, in the company or the industry.
Just to let people know, the last link I put in the chat, that's the link that Rupert August is speaking about.
Yeah, and to be fair to the guy, going to the article, it is a bit sad that it seems to be like a family industry that the guy has been working in. Essentially, that there are multiple generations who have done it in the same place for a long time, and multiple generations, but they're being tossed out. But it is interesting to see this kind of flipped and just so brazenly based on the race of the people who are being affected in either side.
Well, I mean, look, we've got to be honest. Just as the same as we were speaking about, that they're trying to diddle your kids, which they are. When I say they, I mean the left and the LGBTQ movement. Everything is now racist, but only for white people.
Yeah,
nobody else is racist. Only white people. Like, white people are all bad, and straight white men are just totally evil.
Well, it's pure.
This is general.
It's pure friend enemy stuff, though, because I mean, even the what was that case in California where Larry Elder was egged by a white woman in a gorilla mask. Larry Elder being a black Republican, if you're not aware.
Yeah, but he's a coconut, isn't he? So that's fine.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the point. It's pure friend enemy. Meanwhile, Kyle Rittenhouse is a white supremacist because he is shooting 3 white guys.
Yeah, including a pedophile and a wife beater. Let's remind people.
But we know they want to decriminalise paedophilia anyway. So
yeah, of course they do.
That doesn't count.
This is why most of the left, in fact, almost all of the left, defended that vile Netflix thing, Cuties.
Yes, yeah. It's why most of it's why quite a lot of the people we seem to keep running into seem to have had an awful lot to do with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yep. Who surprisingly killed himself in an almost impossible way.
Who conveniently killed himself. Yeah.
There's no way he did kill himself. I mean, does any serious person think he did?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's gone away. Yeah. The problem's gone.
Memory hold.
And no one will ever mention it again because the media, the mainstream media, simply do not do their job. They simply don't do their job.
It depends what you think
they're not meant to. Yeah.
You remember all those films you used to get in the 1980s and 1990s about the fearless investigative reporter exposing the man.
That was gaslighting us into believing that's what the job of reporters is.
Yeah. And the idea that they do that in 2021 is just laughably ridiculous.
Most of them just seem to Google.
Did. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's just like the mainstream media is entirely useless, and all it is the Goebbels propaganda arm for the globalists.
At which it is reasonably good at, unfortunately.
Well, I don't know, man.
Or people are willing to be gullible.
I think more and more people are switching off. I think more and more normies are waking up a bit. I mean, there certainly are here in Victoria and Australia. There was a huge demonstration yesterday in the city, which I'm sure
I saw
know about.
I saw like a 14-year-old girl was being interviewed by what's that guy that has some kind of affiliation with Tommy Robinson in I shouldn't have said that name. That's verboten.
Avi Yemeni.
Yeah, Avi Yemeni from Rebel News. Yes.
Yes, I think I saw him interviewing some Australian 14-year-old girl yesterday, saying how it's just ridiculous, basically.
Well, I mean, there's over many, and also if you're on YouTube, another bloke to look out for is a guy called Aussie Cossack, who's also putting out actual real news. That I would suggest people go and subscribe to. As I say, Aussie Cossack, well worth looking at. Lady of Charlotte in the chat is saying there were 100,000 people in Melbourne yesterday. I would not be able to say the precise numbers because I don't live in Melbourne. I live like 50 odd k's outside Melbourne. But there were a lot of people, and the mainstream media were really not reporting it at all.
Yeah, so Australia, I'm right in thinking that they have now gone the full two-tier society whereby there's going to be a lockdown, and if you're not vaccinated, you will be the ones locked down.
Well, that's what they're claiming. I mean, bear in mind, I live in Victoria, and I'm not vaccinated, and the only way I will get vaccinated is if 6 guys in white coats hold me down.
This is well. They hope it won't get to that point, don't they? They hope everyone will comply because they want their freedoms back. But the problem is, I think for the holdouts now, they've seen the fact that you're not going to get your freedoms back. You're not going to get your freedoms back when the 70-year-olds get vaccinated. You're not going to get them back when the 60-year-olds get vaccinated, the 50, the 40, the 30. You're not going to get them back. We're not going. We're not allowed to go back to the world that existed 2 years ago.
It's never going back to normal. This is the Great Reset. It really is. I mean, I'm going to come on to that in a minute because I'm going to talk very briefly about this COP stuff. But because I've talked about it so many times, but I am going to talk about it briefly in a minute. But what I would just say is, John, you will have seen it on your Discord and on mine, and maybe Rupert might have seen it on my Discord. I put up 2 videos yesterday from Tony Heller, who's a very good chap who does a lot of stuff on climate change. And he also does a lot of stuff on the forced vaccines and this kind of stuff. And he put up 2 extremely good videos which showed people from all around the world, sportsmen and women, very fit young sportsmen and women, dropping dead from heart attacks.
Yeah. And there's a lot of sports individuals who flat out will not have the vaccine because of this, I imagine.
But I mean, he put out a thing which was just far too many people to be accidental in any way, shape, or form.
Interesting is not quite the right word, but
it's there are just young, fit men and women in their 20s and 30s do not drop dead from heart attacks very often at all.
Well, so I think I'm correct to say that the advice is now that you shouldn't be involved in any physically strenuous activity immediately after having the jab because of the risk of myocarditis and blood clots and so on. And my wife was telling me of a school that they gave their kids the injection and then immediately went to go do PE, and it's like you're not even following the guidelines that are being given about it. I'd be furious if that was my child, and I trusted, quote unquote, trusted the science and let them have the jab and stuff because they're not even following the instructions they are being given.
I just think that there hasn't been enough time for them to test this vaccine. No. It just hasn't, and
it took them half a dozen years to acknowledge any effects of thalidomide on the unborn, and until 6 years, until a similar sort of time is up. And you're also talking about companies that paid out, I think, one of the biggest lawsuits ever because they covered up evidence in, various clinical trials, not related to COVID, to other medical products that they sell. But
the same companies,
to my mind, it's
company.
There's no smoke without a fire, right?
And I mean, look, if the vaccine worked and stopped you catching it and stopped you giving it to other people,
we wouldn't be where we are now, would we?
Yeah, but it doesn't. It doesn't stop you catching it. It doesn't stop you giving it to other people. In fact, what's his name? Not Rishi Sunak. The other Asian. Well, there are so many South Asian people in the British cabinet. It's difficult to remember them all because there's so many. I mean, it's over half of the top jobs, and there are only 4 top jobs in the cabinet in Britain. Don't forget. What's his name? The Muslim bloke.
The health secretary.
Yeah, he got really
Sajid Javid.
Sajid Javid, that's the right. He got really angry with a very normie left-wing British reporter because she said, "But it only gives you 37% protection." Well, is that much protection at all?
Shock horror, a reporter actually doing their job.
Yeah, and actually saying the truth for once. And he absolutely lost his shit.
No, I bet he did.
Well,
I found it very telling that the vaccine minister, as was, that evil looking bloke that
Hancock.
No. The vaccine minister.
Oh, I don't even know who that was.
Nazim something, I think he's called something like that.
Is he called Nazim? That's an English name.
Well, he's another one that is the product of exactly what Powell was trying to stop. He was the vaccine minister when they had the cabinet reshuffle recently, and the education secretary got moved on. He got put into the education secretary role. And I am convinced that is because he was to handle a vaccine rollout within the schools.
Yeah.
It was very telling to my mind why he got that job. And interestingly, that's it. That's it, Nadim. And he also has a number of ties to or worked at YouGov.
Amazing.
So when you see all these polls that come out with supporting numbers for exactly what the government say they want to do, I don't believe for a second that strings aren't pulled.
Yeah, I totally agree. Rupert, was there anything else you wanted to add to that thing?
No, just I mean, I guess it's kind of trite and pointless at this point. But
I mean, but both of your points were very good points. I just think we wandered a bit.
No, it's fine. Wherever the conversation goes naturally, it's just curious because you don't see. So for this article in particular, you don't really see the point being brought up that much anymore. Obviously, it used to be a bit of a left-wing talking point, the effect on wages and such, and labor relations and the labor situation generally in the labor market, how immigration affects it, and some left-wing figures, fairly major ones actually as well, being opposed to that. But
when I was growing up, I always found it very bizarre that the party of the worker was at least on paper in favour of this open doors immigration, and the party of finance and big business, the Tories, were supposedly opposed to it. I mean, we know the reality is that they're kind of both in favour, but I always, growing up, I thought surely it should be, surely Labour should be very opposed to the kind of open doors immigration because it impacts directly their workers that support them, right? I mean, it's bizarre.
Yeah, well, I mean, only if you make the naive assumption that that these parties are, following some kind of like coherent and rational policy platform, which has a coherent vision for the country.
As I say, it was something I used to think when I was young, so maybe I can be forgiven for being a bit naive at the time.
But it is the default, right? It's how people generally give the benefit of the doubt to these kinds of systems, where they think, okay, well, this is a logical way in which the system would work, and therefore this is probably how it works. Especially when it's signal boosted by the system itself, saying, yes, well, this is the best way of doing things.
I think as well, like when it comes to politics, like conservatives, not big C, small c conservatives, they're naturally very inclined to be very busy people. They're very involved in raising families. They tend to be far more involved in working and so on, and they don't have the time that like people on the left who are far more inclined to be activists because they're sort of paid by the government to do nothing all day long through various incentives for the jobless. And I think there needs to be a bit more of an awakening in Conservatives, whereby they recognise that they can't simply just vote and send a representative to Parliament. They need to actually be actively engaged, and not necessarily actively engaged in politics, but actively engaged in their communities, like people used to be, in the various societies, in the organisations that used to go on. We need a kind of revival of that, because I think that's kind of the glue that kind of held England together for so long, was the kind of the local associations, the local interactions, the local knowledge, the local people. And part of the kind of globo homo agenda is to disrupt all of that and make us kind of citizens of the world, where we could just be plugged in anywhere, and we have no roots, no connections to the places we live and the places we grew up. And I think it's really important to push back against that, and
I mean, there's definitely
not get yourself bogged down in all this political stuff. And
you have to be a moron to not realize that mass immigration, no matter where it comes from, is going to push up housing costs in terms of both mortgages and rents. While at the one and the same time, it pushes down wages, especially for the less well qualified. That is just so obvious that any moron should know it. It's not difficult. It's not rocket science. I'm sorry, but that one really gets me.
But that's a good thing for enough of the country that.
Enough of the not the main part of the country.
Well, enough of the voter base. I mean, so homeowners, or at least people who are on the housing ladder in some capacity, and people who have some skill, which means that they're not as vulnerable to completely unskilled immigration. Those people really only benefit, apart from the cultural thing, obviously. This
is one of the things, though. It's so short-sighted. I mean, I am a homeowner in the UK, and on paper, I've benefited massively out of the fact that the house prices have risen so drastically. My house is worth double what I paid for it like 8 years ago. But the reality is, if you don't own a second home, it's meaningless what your home is worth, because its value is as a home. And if you wanted to sell it, you'd have to buy another home, at which point you're buying something that's of comparable value anyway. So for most people, it really, if you own a home already, a single home, which is still a majority of the people in the UK, it's completely irrelevant what the house price is, other than the fact it might impact your mortgage repayment.
Well, I think that's the problem is trying, and that's why the government, I think, gets quite panicky at the prospect of negative house price movements, just because it would render so many people illiquid in terms of mortgage repayments and whatever, and not being able to. But again,
it's not. But again, like I say, it's not particularly relevant if you don't live in a if you don't live in a particularly transitory society. I would imagine many people buy a house, and people don't tend to be in the habit of moving frequently when they've bought a place.
Yeah, fair enough.
No, but it is
certainly not a family home. I don't expect I am likely to move probably until my son leaves home.
I think that the lot who are in charge of us now, Alexander Johnson, etc. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure that Keir Starmer would be exactly the same. I think they want people to move towards leasing and renting and not owning at all.
England in the early 20th century, it was, I think, somewhere in the region of 70% rental.
Yeah.
It's not unprecedented in the UK. It's a very 20th century invention, is home ownership.
Yeah, but having said that, renting and leasing will absolutely push us down that New World Order, live in the pod, eat the bugs stream. It absolutely will. because
All of the things
owning property is one of the things that gives you a stake in society.
Yeah, all other things being equal, it would, but there are definitely ways in which you could do it that would, not face that problem. In fact, you could use it as a mechanism to take some power away from the central government, just because you add extra intermediary bodies potentially. If you had something like a local organization that owned a lot of houses, and then you have something like a local patron, and housing has to go through that avenue.
Yeah, but then you're looking again back to something like the Cadbury-Bourneville thing.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
I don't see us going in that direction at all. Sadly, in many respects, I think it's going to be government.
Well, yeah, exactly.
This came up on that Cadbury-Bourneville stuff came up on our stream that we did last night, and I think we were talking about Marcus Rashford and how he's painted as this saint because he's convinced the government to spend money on school dinners out in holiday time and things like that. And it's really bizarre to me when I consider the kind of history of philanthropy in the UK. And we had great I can never pronounce that. Philanthropists. We had great philanthropists in the UK throughout modern history, and Marcus Rashford's there getting a flipping medal and an MBE or whatever it is, because he convinced the government to spend the British taxpayers' money, which, to be clear, he does his level best to avoid paying, as anyone should.
Yeah, and all rich people certainly do.
He does his level best to avoid paying it. So he's not doing any charity work. I know he is doing some charity work on the side as it happens, but by doing that specific thing, he's not doing any charity work. He's just telling the government where they should spend the money they tax from us. And I find it disgusting that he gets a reward for that. He should set up his own business as a charity that does that, and then he could get a reward for that.
Yeah, well, that ain't gonna happen, is it? It's not gonna happen. It's just not.
And of course, that's all astroturfed anyway, because he's got minders and various people that run all his Twitter and stuff for him. It's not actually his campaign; it's their campaign on his behalf. So he's getting the credit for something he literally had nothing to do with.
Yeah, no, I totally see what you're saying. I just think, it's...
And you're right, though, Angie. The celebrities of today are not interested in the philanthropy of the kind of landed gentry and the wealthier upper class people of the past, because there's no ideology behind it. Cadbury did what he did because he had a vision of what the right thing to do by people was, and these people don't have that. They're just after it for clout, and they're just scumbags.
I just want to answer Jamie Dodger in the chat here. He's saying, I hear the AA guns over London were positioned so that the shells fell on poor slums. Absolute bollocks, Jamie Dodger. My father was like 12 when World War II ended, and during World War II, and he was in central London, and his own place was bombed flat by the Luftwaffe during the Blitz in 1940. And luckily, they were in the air raid shelter, so they didn't die. The AA guns in London in World War II were positioned where the German bombers were, so they were positioned over the middle of London. So, I'm sorry, I'm quite happy to support people speaking the truth, but not people who talk shit. And the AA guns weren't even... they were air bursting, and so you got bits of shrapnel landing. Like most of the shrapnel my dad collected in World War II, a few bits of which he still had when I was a kid, were bits of British anti-aircraft shells.
I'm sure you were rather a bit of British AA shrapnel falling on you than bombs falling on you, to be quite honest. But...
Yes. Well, like I said, my dad's place was blown to smithereens by the Luftwaffe in 1940, so...
I owe my existence to the Luftwaffe, so I can't criticise them too much.
How so? How so?
It's a rather contrived story, but my one of my relatives was hit by a piece of shrapnel from a bomb, and in the process of fixing said relative up, they discovered that my relative had quite serious abscesses on their lung, certainly likely to have killed them in the not too distant future, and they were able to be treated with the miracle that was penicillin. So yes, I owe my life to Hitler and his Luftwaffe.
Well, I can say that my mother was from Tipperary in Southern Ireland, but her dad was an ex-RAF bloke who moved there after World War II because he wanted to get away from it all. So, so there you go. And he was Welsh, by the way. And he was Welsh. So yeah. But yeah, there's that. All right, guys, I'm going to move us on to something else now because I did my usual look at the Bias Brainwashing Corporation before we started. And I kept a couple of articles up because I just thought they were so disgusting, basically. Let's see. Where are we? So, world news. New climate deal struck in Glasgow at COP26. Although India and China, actually it was China and India, meant that there's no commitment from those guys to get rid of coal at all. So that was bullshit. Okay. Dutch anti-lockdown protesters face water cannon in The Hague, which they put up a picture but try and portray them as like anti-vaxxers and all this absolute crap that people believe. We have Steve Bannon charged with contempt of Congress. What a surprise! I'm just amazed for that one.
Is that a crime? That sounds perfectly just. You should be contempt of Congress.
Yeah, I would say so too. We have the BBC's John Simpson in Taliban territory 20 years on. Well, there you go, 20 years of British soldiers being killed and maimed and wounded for absolutely no purpose whatsoever. But, let's not talk about that. There is the Belarus border where access is denied for the immigrants on the Poland-Belarus border. Because Poland's trying to defend its borders, for God's sake.
Poland, after having exported a considerable proportion of their population to the rest of the EU, now doesn't want any themselves.
Yeah. But they've also got this is the Bias Brainwashing Corporation, the BBC. They've also got migrants camped on EU's freezing border. Well, they don't have to be in the EU's freezing border. They could have stayed at home, for God's sake.
Especially considering most of them are Kurds, from what I've heard.
Yeah, they're not even mostly from places that have recently had a war. I mean, most of these people, let's be honest, they are really and truly economic migrants. But you're not allowed to call them that. But that's exactly what they are. Then the next BBC article is Indian activists who changed the face of Britain. The Friends oiled the wheels of Indian independence and challenged discrimination in the UK. Ex-apprentice drops defamation case against Trump. Well, there's a surprise.
Yeah, conveniently, it now all goes away. Yeah.
China's toxic fertilizer causes diplomatic stink.
Good.
I don't know. And where are we?
The fact that any nation on the planet still trades with China after 2020 is beyond me.
Well, even the MSM have more or less admitted it came from
it came from a Chinese.
I mean, to be fair, it does take time to actually move supply chains and untangle 30 or so years of getting caught up in outsourcing to China and whatever. So it'll take some time to reverse, but I'm quite certain that the process is being reversed over time now.
I hope you're right, mate.
I'll believe it when I see it.
I mean, in some cases, to be fair, it isn't. It's leaving China to go elsewhere, not coming back to the countries from which it originates necessarily, but to go to Vietnam or whatever, or India or some such. But the fact that it's leaving China is at least a tiny step in the right direction.
China needs to be left I mean, it's already pretty destitute, but an entirely destitute country, and its people need to overthrow its government, because its people have been made a global mockery because of its government.
I think the idea that some on the right put about that in some way or another the Chinese Communist Party, because they are supposedly not globalists, are our friends is ridiculous. The enemy of your enemy is not necessarily your friend.
No, agreed.
You know, Stalin was enemies with Hitler in World War II. Didn't make him Britain's friend.
No, but Imperial Germany was not exactly pro-communist, but they were certainly very good at creating the conditions for which communism could really spread its wings.
Well, yeah, I mean, they actually smuggled Lenin into the old Tsarist Russia. So, yeah, absolutely.
Indeed, with plenty of money and all the rest of it.
Yeah, absolutely true. Which is something you will never get the Nazi LARPers to admit to, but yeah, they did. There's a few other stories I just wanted to mention from the wonderful Bias Brainwashing Corporation. Of course, one they've got on here is "I Could Have Been a Racist Killer" by Stephanie Hegarty. Population correspondent, whatever the fuck that's supposed to be. As a teenager, Mark was an armed and angry US Nazi. Looking back, he fears he came close to murder. So he didn't do anything at all, but this is worthy of a story on the BBC. All right, that's those ones. And then let's have a look at the UK stories. COP26, how might decisions at the climate summit change our lives? A deal has been agreed and signed at the climate summit in Glasgow. You might be left wondering what, if anything, it will mean for you. Here's some of the changes.
That depends. Do you like having the lights on?
Yeah. I mean, that's going to be... Yeah, they won't that one's not mentioned, I can tell you now.
Yeah, do you like having the lights on and the boiler on in winter?
Yeah. Are you against power cuts every week?
Do you enjoy being able to travel more than 100 miles from your home?
Yeah. Would you like your grandmother to survive next winter?
Not if she's going to be a burden on the NHS.
Yeah, absolutely. She should just die. Absolutely. I mean,
I can't believe she'd be selfish enough to consider anything else.
I mean, I reckon they should just give old people suicide pills so that they are not a burden on the NHS. And then every night people can go and clap after their grandmother has killed herself.
So again, I'm a big fan of Powell. There's an interview he does with Dick Cavett, and there's a chap on called Jonathan Miller, and obviously, as so much of Powell's conversations after his Birmingham speech, it's centered around immigration, and this Jonathan Miller bloke seriously tried to argue that the immigrants from the land of the dead, i.e. people who, 2 decades ago might not have lived to the age that they live now. They would have passed away because of lack of penicillin or whatever. He was arguing that they're basically the same as immigrants, and if you're on about not having immigrants coming in, then you should be in favor, as some doctors are, of not treating people after a certain age. And these people are just worthless scum.
Yep, I totally agree with you.
As if you can compare your grandma to some complete unknown from goodness knows what country, along with all of their extended family that they also bring over, and as if you can possibly compare the two.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm just going to read a few highlights from this BBC thing about COP26. And one is that electric cars. Experts predict that new electric vehicles could cost the same as new petrol or diesel cars within 5 years or so. I bet that's one prediction that will not come true. So many predictions that are made these days.
The cost of electric cars will come down. That is, economies of scale, but
it won't come down to the cost of a second-hand petrol.
No, you're not going to be paying you're not going to be paying 4 or 5 grand for a car that you can run for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. No,
Exactly
no chance.
right. Exactly right. And this, I think, is very telling. It will also be possible to lease electric vehicles because, you know, you will own nothing and be happy.
Well, then again,
yeah, but
we're even being offered loans for pizza in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I saw that. Oh, pay your Domino's off over 3 months. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm sorry, if you have to pay a takeaway off over 3 months, something's gone drastically wrong in your life.
Yeah, they're also saying, meanwhile, others argue we need fewer cars on the road, and walking and cycling could also be among the changes we make. Well, I mean, look, you know, you can only walk and cycle so far.
Well, yeah,
if you want to go somewhere.
I'm not opposed to that as a concept. I would love for more individuals to choose to voluntarily do that. I would love for more people to work nearer to their homes, for example. You know, I myself chose a job relatively near to my home, which means I can cycle to it, and I've had jobs that I've been a walking distance. I think that would be a generally beneficial thing if people voluntarily chose to do that, but you can't,
on the other hand,
you can't force everyone to act in a certain way. It's just
there's just not enough jobs for that in all parts of the country anyway. But I mean, even leaving that aside, if you, John, wanted to take your family to Cornwall for a holiday, or
you couldn't do that in an electric car.
Yeah, or the north of Scotland, you just ain't going to be able to do it.
And you know, I'm a responsible global citizen. I don't holiday abroad or anything like that. So I would be looking to take my family perhaps to Cornwall or Scotland, but I'll be prevented from doing that with an electric car because they simply don't have the range.
Yeah, I mean it's another hypocrisy, but I mean also, of course, they want to stop us ordinary average plebs traveling around the world. Now I'm talking as someone who's been to about 50 countries, if you count British overseas territories. And I mean, I think people should be able to travel if they want to travel. I mean, you know, I'm not against it. I think travel's a good thing. The next one they go on about. More than 40 countries have signed up to phasing out coal, except China and India, of course, who are the biggest users of coal.
People who burn the most, yeah.
So all the other countries signing up to get rid of it absolutely makes no difference, while China and India don't. And they're not even talking about places like Indonesia, which also have not, which has got hundreds of millions of people.
Of course, what we also have to bear in mind is that so much of China and India exists the way it exists because it's become the sweatshop of the world. So it's all very well and good saying we've cut coal in England, but if you then import everything you own from India and China, you're still behind the usage of that coal. So you've not done anything. You've just outsourced it.
And it can often be more dirty and less efficient to do so. But
indeed, because they often have less regulations, lower standards, and you know, not that I'm
the simple fact that you've got to transport it as well as a
guys, let me remind you, this is from the UK BBC site, what I'm reading here. Yeah. And the next thing they go on about, solar panels and heat pumps could become standard in our homes. We'll build new houses using low carbon alternatives to cement and concrete. You know, live in the pod, boys, because that's really what they're talking about there. And they focus on making sure our buildings, infrastructure, and communities are able to withstand the current and future impact of climate change. Well, if this stuff is actually working, there won't be an impact, will there?
They're going to have a hard job doing that when around where I live, it's virtually all a floodplain, and up until the sort of 20th century, there wasn't a lot of building around where I lived at all. And now I was cycling past places in the summer where there's standing water because it's a floodplain, and about 20 or 30 yards away they're putting up these new build, you know, what are they called, the new build Barretts or whatever. And it's just, if climate change is real, and regardless of whether climate change is real, I guarantee you within the next 5 to 10 years, all of those houses will have problems with flooding. All of them.
Well, this is a good segue into the next paragraph of this Our Homes Get Greener. The next one is, this could include improving green space in and around our homes to absorb extreme rainfall, installing cool roofs that reflect sunlight and prevent overheating, because that's like such a big problem in Britain, and introducing shutters so that homes can withstand hurricane winds. Again, a huge problem in Britain, hurricane winds. You know, Britain gets that sort of a wind like once in a decade, maybe.
Oh, we had a tornado a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. Oh, listen, we had a really bad windstorm like about a week ago, which is why I ended up having a power cut last week. But they don't happen every day, and Australia has damn sight more extreme weather than UK, and always has had. Anyway, now this is one they've stunk away. They've actually hidden this away. We may start paying more for carbon. Our lifestyles contribute to carbon emissions, whether we're shopping for imported food or flying away on a foreign holiday. Well, in future, let me finish. I'll stop when I'm finished, and you can absolutely comment, both of you. In future, we may see the cost of a product's carbon emissions being added to the price we pay, whether or not it's made in the UK. So if a business doesn't try and reduce the emissions of the goods it's selling, its prices may have to go up. It is hoped that it will make consumers and businesses think again about how we consume and where we put our money. In response to this, some big household names like Amazon and Unilever and IKEA, all great, really planet-friendly companies, have now said that they are looking to ensure the cargo ships they use will deliver goods will run on cleaner fuels. Guys, you got any comments on that? But there's a couple more.
We already do charge for carbon. CO2 emissions, I think it is.
On the face of this, if you buy into the climate science and so on, a lot of this could be construed as relatively rational and logical.
If you're a moron,
steps to take.
If you're
what a moron, I don't understand, and maybe the article will cover this, but Boris Johnson certainly tweeted before COP26 about how they were going to discuss cash and its implications for global warming. And I can't. I mean, whatever
doesn't happen.
Well, assuming carbon is a greenhouse gas that if we put lots of in the atmosphere, it's going to cause us problems. If you take all that at face value, you can buy into we need to get rid of combustion engines and we need to, tax companies more if they're. But where does cash come into this? And why are you talking about cash as being a problem?
Yeah, it's got no relevance. Yeah, absolutely. You're right, Rupert. You're right. This one's a laugh, okay? And I will have something to say about this one after I've finished reading it. More space for nature. Nature's role in fighting climate change and the need to restore. Sorry, carry on.
No, so you cannot have more. This is the threefold problem of the modern day, which is that they claim they want more green space. They claim they want more homes.
And they keep building on it for mass immigration.
And yes, and the Tory party claim they're against mass immigration, but their actions speak volumes to the contrary. And every other party is in favour of mass immigration. Yeah. And so you cannot
every other major party, to be fair.
Well, even a lot of the minor ones like the Green and the Lib Dems and.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was talking more about people.
I know who you mean.
The right of centre guys. There are right of centre parties that are not.
Look, Bigot, we have plenty of space left in the UK. We're not overcrowded at all. If you want to see grass,
when you look at it on the map, yeah. Well, this is when you import the population of Birmingham every 3 years, you cannot increase your green space. End of discussion.
Yeah.
Not unless you're.
Parts of England are more overcrowded already today than large parts of India. in terms of actual population per acre.
I mean, unless you're willing to start forcing people to live underground like troglodytes, which I wouldn't put past the elite.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, they tried putting everyone up in tower blocks.
Yeah,
that went well. But anyway, let me just read this, guys, and then you can absolutely comment on it. Nature's role in fighting climate change and the need to restore the natural world from forests to peatland was high on the agenda at Glasgow, and we may see benefits in greener spaces around our towns and cities. Nature can be helping us here if we looked to actually treat it with the respect it deserves. Let me finish. Says Dr. Emily Schuckberg of the University of Cambridge. The arguments to make space for nature are now clearer and louder than ever, says Craig Bennett, Chief Executive of the Wildlife Trusts. There is now renewed momentum about the need to protect forests and other precious habitats and put nature in recovery. Now, as John was just saying, I just want to emphasize this. More and more green belt land in Britain is built on every single year, and we just had a case in Kent where Michael Gove overrode the local council who said no and said yes, you can build there, and it's only because of immigration, because the actual birth rate in Britain is ridiculously small.
The native born population is at or below replacement level.
Yeah, it's below replacement levels. We are shrinking as a people in Britain, but we build on more and more. Yeah, I mean, in terms of, I don't know if it's fine. I think we should have replacement levels, but
there would be a natural equilibrium.
I think it might sort itself out in due course, but I think
part of the problem is immigration and wage compression. If people earn more, they'd be more inclined to have more children.
If they earn more and if housing costs were a bit lower, yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Large parts of the whole system are built around the idea of a population boom being basically continuous. The next generation being bigger than the last,
bigger than the previous one.
And
yeah.
you need that for modern economies.
The whole welfare system is based on the idea that each generation will be bigger than the previous. To be honest,
yeah, exactly. But that, in combination with the idea that pretty much every sort of explosion onto the world stage in a geopolitical sense is necessarily accompanied by a population explosion. Like you need demographics to back up making plays on the world stage, and so we'd either be in irrelevance or actively a piece in someone else's game if we didn't have a growing population, especially if our population was shrinking. So you run into big problems. But
it's going to grow up. But I mean, look, with automation and AI, etc., you would think that kind of stuff is overcomable. I mean, Japan has exactly the same population problem as the native British, but doesn't have mass third-world immigration or mass immigration of any kind. Well, I've heard people say people keep saying but it's a fact that like 99% of Japanese are still Japanese.
Yes, for now. But I mean, even I've had adverts now that have been encouraging me to go and emigrate to Japan because it's such a needs more foreigners.
Well, I follow a few people who actually live in Japan because I find it quite interesting. I find modern Japanese culture quite interesting, and I follow quite a few people there. And foreigners are still a tiny minority.
I've heard Japan, or the people of Japan, and I don't want to disparage them in any way. I actually mean it as a compliment. They are very hostile towards people who don't become familiar with Japanese culture.
They expect you to learn the language and all this stuff. You're absolutely right. Yep, very true.
It depends where you go, I think. But the government will bypass that anyway if they want to.
I don't think they want to, man. I see people keep saying, "Oh no, Japan is going to import people." They don't, and even when they do it on very short-term visas.
As soon as our base stepped down, they did start having this push. It's not.
It's still not changed anything yet. I don't think that this is going to happen. Like Japan is far better off now than Britain was, say, in Enoch Powell's time.
Yes,
far better off. There is no comparison whatsoever. Now, all right, let me move on to the next one, guys. Again, I mean, I think the idea that there's going to be more space for nature in the UK is absolutely bloody ridiculous.
On that topic,
yeah.
I'm not opposed to the concept of well, I'm absolutely not opposed to the concept of more green space. I think this should be a green and pleasant land. But I would love to see things like tree-lined streets making a return. But I know for a fact various councils up and down the UK have been hacking down all their tree-lined streets because the leaves cause a problem, or it's just utter nonsense. You could have beautiful, and Roger Scruton would be one to agree where he's still alive. You can have beautiful large cities that have green spaces and greenery within them, but we are obsessed with a kind of compartmentalization of, no, this is a concrete city here, this is a green space there, and there are ways you can combine the two and create livable environments that are relatively healthy and not so toxic for the individual and the community as they are in the kind of 21st century.
I don't think anyone with any common sense is going to disagree with that, John, at all. I find it hard to believe anyone with any common sense would disagree with that. Would you disagree with that, River?
No, not at all. I definitely want a lot more sort of green space. In fact, I saw quite a good project recently that sort of been brought to fruition where I can't remember which organization it was. It was one of the national conservational organizations that had restored one of the otherwise barren glens up in Scotland and sort of brought it back to life with forests and reintroduction of species and such, and actually made it into a living environment again rather than just a desolate wasteland.
I would be much more interested in reforestation and rewilding if we had zero immigration. I would much rather have the former than
guys. Can I just say I've got to do something for about 2 minutes. Can you just carry on with the conversation for a minute?
We'll try.
Well, I mean, this is the problem, as we were just saying, that it's a fine objective, but it's completely incongruent with the rest of the.
It's completely undermined by everything else that they want to kind of try and do. And I'm a big advocate. I think the Conservatives, as a party, are the natural kind of the natural kind of party of environmentalism. And when I say environmentalism, what I mean is kind of like a conservation of environment, a preservation of wildlife, animal species, and green and pleasant space for people to live in and have as a part of their lives. I think that's a fundamentally conservative principle. But
we're also discovering that there are actual practical implications as well for trying to optimize everything and scientifically manage everything.
Yes. Nature's pretty good at managing that herself. Thank you very much. But I don't buy into all this. We all need electric cars, or we all need XYZ, and all these heat pumps now that seem to be the big thing. And anyone who's in the business, and I'm sure they will get more efficient over time and what have you, but anyone who's in the business will tell you that you could put an air source heat pump in every home in the UK, but every single home would need to have their whole system ripped out. They'd need brand new radiators that are sort of 2-3 times the size of the existing ones, or they'd need to have underfloor heating installed. And it's just disproportionate cost to the benefit that's available at the end of it.
Let's remember that even today, the UK produces less than 1% of the emissions of the world. Less than 1%. Nothing the UK does is really going to make any difference.
Well, per capita, our emissions are at pre-industrialized levels, pre-industrial revolution levels, and yes, that's a per capita argument. So of course you got to factor in that the population of the UK is sort of, I don't know, 7-8 times larger than it was at pre-industrial levels too, but that's still pretty good going.
And even if UK gets to net zero, especially when China and India and Indonesia and lots of other shoals are producing ever more, emissions, it's going to make no damn difference. All it's going to do is make ordinary British people poorer.
And they will produce more, because the way we will get to net zero is by removing those jobs from our society and transplanting them to their society.
Yeah, and I mean, yes, China's building over 100 new coal-fired power stations.
Yeah, because they're not stupid.
Yeah.
Well, they're suffering their own energy crisis, yeah. So.
I mean, let's just finish this little article, chaps, if you don't mind. I think this is quite an important one. More expensive food, ? Breaking the link between cutting down forests in the global south and products consumed in the global north, such as soybeans, beef, and palm oil, could end the era of cheap food. When they say that, by the way, guys, they mean will end the era of cheap food, relatively cheap food. More than 100 countries have signed up to the Glasgow Leaders' Declaration on Forests, which aims to halt deforestation. Experts say that a hard choice could be faced, means it will be. Deforestation will never be stopped if sustainability concerns are always outcompeted by price. Consumers will inevitably have to absorb some of these costs, i.e. all of these costs, because no one else is going to absorb them. If they want to deliver on the COP26 declaration by paying more and consuming less, said Toby Gardner of the Stockholm Environment Institute. So in other words, this comes back to what they were talking about. People eating meat once a week is what they want people to get to the situation of, and it costing like 4 times what it does now.
I mean, most of that I'm not necessarily not in favour of, just in the sense of trying to protect farming interests in the industrialised world. But who it really is going to screw over is the places that are still trying to develop their economies and still reliant on agriculture to sort of prop them up. That's going to reduce large portions of their economy from exporting and developing other industries to subsistence farming. There's nothing else they can do.
It's also going to make kids less healthy. I mean, human beings are designed to eat meat. We are omnivores. We are not vegetarians. And particularly when you're a child, you get a more balanced diet if you eat meat as well as vegetables and fruits, etc. And also, this is obviously not going to affect the, in air quotes, elites. Not going to have any effect on them, because they'll still have their private jets and they'll still be able to get their beef steaks and roast beef and anything else they want. It's only going to affect ordinary people.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you leave aside the hypocrisy, because you're absolutely right, it's not, generally speaking, the elite that will forego any of the things that are going to be considered luxuries for the plebeian once again. But I mean, again, in principle, I'm not opposed to the idea of people being more mindful of their consumerism and the impact that has on the world around them. And unbridled consumerism does have a negative impact on the world around you. And price is a means of bringing that home to the individual, I suppose. It's not the means I would choose. But I think a lot of the problem is that people don't have the time or ability to be as mindful as perhaps previous generations were. I mean, I was just thinking of you talking about meat there. I mean, I'm a vegetarian, so the meat doesn't bother me. But I know that when my grandmother and my wife's mother, they're not too dissimilar in age. I know that when they cook a chicken, every single part of that chicken is going to get used, and their family will be eating from that chicken for the whole week. Sandwiches and the broth and all that kind of stuff, and they're boil down the bones and everything. But I know for a fact people of my generation, they're so wasteful that they will throw out half of the chicken. And I'm not opposed to people rethinking that. But the problem is that people don't have the time, because both parents are always working full time. The skills aren't passed down, and we've lost that ability to kind of make use of everything we have. And I don't think increasing the price of stuff is going to change that.
I am honestly convinced that the whole of this watermelon green stuff,
it's to kill people off.
Well, it's not even that. It's a vast wealth transfer. They want to make advanced Western nations like the UK and Australia much poorer for ordinary people who live in them. They want to lower ordinary people's standard of living in advanced Western nations. And I think that totally goes along with a vast horde of beige people. That is the other thing that they constantly push. This is what the elites think is going to give them the world they want. There'll be this 1% which can do anything they like, go anywhere they like, kind of like, a horde of Jeffrey Epsteins. And amazingly, a lot of these 1% were actually quite closely related to Jeffrey Epstein in one way or another. They're going to be able to go all around the world and do what they like in their private jets with their private security forces. But everybody else, I think, you look at some of these dystopian science fiction films that we've seen over the years where like society has basically collapsed for most people. I think that's exactly where we're headed. And that's what the global elites are making us go into. And I think the green agenda and the LGBTQ stuff and the mass immigration is all part of that. And I'm not a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist at all. It's just, if you've got any common sense, you can open your eyes, see what's going on. And to me, that is what's going on. I really think that is the ultimate aim of all this. Because if you look at it, it's all going down to the same end. It really is. And I think we're eventually going to get to the stage where very few people are going to be allowed to breed. I think that's going to happen.
You get into the kind of Brave New World territory.
Yeah, absolutely. Brave New World. Brave New World, I think it's an underrated book because everyone goes on about 1984.
There's kind of four, isn't there? There's Animal Farm, 1984, Brave New World, and Fahrenheit. Is it 451?
Yeah. But I think Brave New World gets too overlooked because everyone knows of 1984, even if they haven't read it. But I think Brave New World is more where we're going. I really do. And it's just obvious to me these days. I mean, you've just got to look at what's going on and what they're pushing for. And I honestly think we're going to get to the stage where you won't be allowed to breed. Eventually.
I don't know if it will be that you won't be allowed to. I think it will be that you won't physically be able to.
Well, you're going to end up with like a one-child policy like China had for a long time.
Well, it'll be the equivalent. I think you'll get to the equivalent where you are basically like the Jaffa Orange, and you're bred to be seedless. That's how I think.
Yeah, I'm perfectly likely. Yeah. Sorry,
we're already though in the state where we don't really want to breed as a society. Every continent except Africa, and Africa is trending downwards, are in negative fertility rate. So.
Well, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, the state don't need to do this because the people are already at the point where they're willing to kill off a quarter of their offspring.
But I think the state is doing it, to be fair.
Well, the state provide the tools. The people are, no one has to go and get an abortion. People choose to, and the fact is a quarter of all potential parents are choosing to. They don't need the state to kind of force them to do that.
No, but the state doesn't encourage nuclear families at all.
Oh no, of course. Why would it?
And has become more and more. Well, why would it? Because that's a solid basis for a nation and a society.
I don't disagree, but if you're hell bent on a kind of Georgia Guidestone New World Order kind of thing, why would you?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly my point. I got two little things I'm just going to bring up before we close up here, guys. Where are we? There were two things I saw here. This is a game from the Biased Brainwashing Corporation, the BBC. Worthy of news is that there is now Kath Whitaker is Britain's only female arm wrestling referee.
Who cares?
And looking at her, I'm pretty sure she's a lesbian, but there we go. And what was the other one I saw? Oh, yeah. Gay couple in landmark church in Wales blessing. The first same-sex blessing by the church has taken place following a change in the rules in Wales. So I thought
I'm glad they've changed the Bible.
Yeah,
like,
obviously.
There's only a dozen or more passages in there that are talk pretty strongly about what marriage is and what sexual acts you ought not to engage with, and yeah. Well, I guess what does the Bible know? Why do you want to get the Word of God involved in the church after all?
Yeah, don't disagree. Rupert, you got anything to add on
that one? No, I don't think so. I mean, the only thing would be just on that last point. Introducing anything concrete would be terribly divisive, wouldn't it? So you want to be as inclusive as possible. Don't make any strong statements about anything, because that would be to exclude.
And you can't do that unless it's white people, and especially straight white men. You can absolutely exclude them.
Yes, well, I mean, they're the great Satan, of course. So obviously.
Yeah. I don't know, guys. A bit of a black pilling stream, I suppose, in some respects, but I don't know what else we can do. I would just give people a heads up that within the next couple of weeks, I am hoping with a friend, or actually a couple of friends, to do a Jonathan Bowden stream. The late, great Jonathan Bowden, who I am a great admirer of, one of the greatest orators of recent times, in my opinion, who has a lot of interesting things to say. So keep an eye out for that. As I said at the start of the stream, hopefully on Thursday or Friday, that old Commonwealth stream that I had to abandon because I had a power cut and couldn't do it will come about again. Anything you'd like to shill, gentlemen? John?
I would recommend, particularly people in the UK, follow the Wellington Project on Twitter, or sign up to the website. There's a kind of a group of 7 of us that are kind of, it's acorns at the moment, but the kind of ideal is that we build a network of people who share ideas and through connections and our own kind of quote unquote activism, we can begin to push back in various institutions, in politics and so on. And I think we're kind of quite in favour of a kind of localism approach. Almost ignore a lot of the rubbish where you can, and just worry about building up your own community. And
I will put a link to the Wellington Project in the description of this video, but it probably won't be up for a couple of hours, okay? Because for me it's early morning and I haven't been asleep.
That's fine.
But I'll do it in a bit. Anything you'd like to share, Rupert?
I think the only thing I'm really active on, and that's active with being very generous with that word, is Twitter at the moment. I just recently wrote a brief summary of Jacques Catalano, I think is how you pronounce his name, of the Vendée uprisings, one of the leaders. I'm going to be probably writing another mini summary of one or two of the other figures who are part of that same movement on the counter-revolutionary side, and so that's kind of what I've been working through at the moment, looking at counter-revolutionary figures.
Well, that will be interesting because the Vendée uprising is not well known. Like, this was during the French Napoleonic Wars, and it's not particularly well known in the UK.
Indeed, even though we did send them a bit of help and try to.
We sent them muskets and so on, but there's actually a Hornblower book which is somewhat about that. I do believe.
I'm not too familiar, but it sounds interesting. Sounds like something.
They made the excellent Hornblower TV series. They actually made an episode about it called, what was it? I don't know, something like the Frogs and the Roast Beefs, and like a single British battalion gets sent to help these French guys, and of course there's nowhere near enough troops, so like loads of people end up dying. But yeah, the Vendy uprising is comparatively little known in Britain, so that would be very interesting, Rupert.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I guess a long term, it'd be nice to look at other counter revolutions as well. So particularly, I've been reading about the the Russian Revolution as well. Sorry, and some of the figures and events around that.
The White Russians and so on. Yeah.
Yes, and the Kornilov affair, the attempted Kornilov putsch, quote unquote. Maybe I'll cover some others as well. Just see where it goes. Counter-revolution is a very fascinating topic.
If you DM me the link, Rupert, I'll make sure I'll stick that in the description of this video in due course as well. Okay. By the way, I've seen a few people commenting on the chat that like they're keen on the Jonathan Bowden stuff. If you are keen on Jonathan Bowden, if you go to the YouTube channel called Jonathan Bowden, there is actually some new Bowden footage that hasn't been seen before on that channel, and it's a really good video because it's about Admiral Nelson, and Bowden is doing some quotes from Nelson and so on. So go and check that out, guys. It's a very good video. As I say, the YouTube channel is called Jonathan Bowden, and he is a very good friend of this channel. So yeah, go for that. Thank you to my guests, and I'm going to play us out the tune. Okay, and that was, of course, Hearts of Oak, which is the March of the Royal Navy, and also, I believe, of the Royal New Zealand Navy and the Royal Canadian Navy. Used to be of the Royal Australian Navy, but they changed that to a march called with frank, marvellous originality, Royal Australian Navy. So, anyway, all right, guys, thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week with our 49th episode. And before that, we should have our old Commonwealth stream. Thank you very much to John and Rupert August for joining me. And go well, and do not let the bastards grind you down, guys.